Gold Key Ragnar is absolutely not the commander that I thought I would be talking about in 2026, especially not when it comes to the Season of Conquest endgame meta. But I saw Gold Key Ragnar be used multiple times in my current KVK and my mind was a little bit blown. So I wanted to bring this video to you guys to kind of explore how some people are actually using Gold Key Ragnar in the endgame, and is it actually good? Should you consider using him, or did our enemies just make an absolute massive mistake trying to make this work? So in this video, not only are we going to cover why people are using him, this synergy he has in the end game, and then later in the video we'll cover a couple of actual reports from my KVK before I give you guys my thoughts and opinions on everything. But before we jump in, of course, what's going on, guys? Cheers. Now, as you guys know, I am a partner creator with Rise of Kingdoms, so if you want more Rise of Kingdoms content, drop a like down below. I have been in Kingsland for the last 5 days, and before that we had past 7, and so I am so far behind on making content because I've literally just been glued to this chair. But I'll talk about all of that in a future video covering this KVK, so if you don't want to miss it, subscribe down below. Now, with all of that being said, let's talk about Gold Key Ragnar and why he was actually used in this KVK multiple times by end game players. We have to look at the synergy here between his kit and the primary commander that he was paired with, and that is none other than Choe Yeong, a legendary archer garrison commander whose primary method of dealing damage is actually true damage on the active skill combined with counterattack damage. So we'll talk about that in just a second, but first let's actually review what Gold Key Ragnar is even doing, because technically he is a leadership and conquering commander. So the idea that his best endgame synergy is for an archer garrison is like quite counterintuitive to what you might actually expect out of Gold Key Ragnar. Okay, so the first thing we have to look at here is the active skill. Now, before it's expertise, it's a little bit worse, but once you get the expertise, this commander's troop deals 40% more damage and takes 20% less damage for 5 seconds. Now, that is just a straight buff to your army. It doesn't matter if it's open field, rally, or garrison, and it's for 5 seconds, which is quite frankly a pretty long buff, especially in Rise of Kingdoms. I don't think we see any buffs that last longer than 5 seconds unless you count the ones that refresh themselves as they gain stacks. But okay, 40% all damage, super good. 20% less all damage taken, also super good. Second skill says this commander's troop gains 20% attack. That is universal attack. Okay, so again, if we're talking about a garrison situation, you actually might be able to put troops in that flag or fortress or whatever that aren't necessarily archers and gain the benefit of the stats you get from Ragnar, right? So a little bit of a mixed garrison situation there could be nice. Obviously you're going to strongly prefer archers anyway, but it's still nice to see that. The second part of the skill says whenever this troop launches a basic attack, it has a 10% chance to reduce the target's healing received by 40% for 3 seconds. We don't really care that much about that. And then the third skill literally does nothing in the garrison. This is when you hit a city. The fourth skill also pretty much does nothing in a garrison, because this is when you're leading a rally attack. So okay, the garrison captain can bring 10% more troops, cool, and that's pretty much it for the skills. Now, if we take a look at the museum here, you'll recall that Ragnar does have a museum relic here as well, and this goes all the way up to tier 3, which gives you 35% troop defense and 20% normal damage taken reduction. Okay, so once again we see universal stats, which I mean 35% defense, 20% attack, that is 55% of stats. That is actually on par with endgame meta. Okay, so really nice stuff, and that's universal. Like I said, it's not just archers, it's for everybody. And then 20% normal damage taken reduction is also quite strong, very tanky, especially when you consider that that is basically taking 20% less smite damage and 20% less combo damage as well, right? I mean, those are scaling off of normal damage, and that's pretty good, especially when you stack it on top of the fact that you're already taking 20% less all damage for 5 seconds on the active skill. And if this flag does get swarmed, right, which it is punishing to swarm a Choe Yeong, okay, so I would not recommend doing it, but if the flag is getting swarmed, it's going to generate rage pretty quickly, and the faster you generate rage, the faster you cast your active skills, and the less time your flag is going to spend without this buff. So effectively, while being swarmed, you pretty much always have, or almost always have, 40% all damage and 40% all damage taken reduction, right? At least in the case of taking a smite damage infantry rally or a combo damage cavalry rally. It's a little bit different for archers because they deal skill damage, so the relic isn't as good with Ragnar against archers specifically, but that's kind of all he does here, right? He gives you a tremendous amount of all damage and a tremendous amount of all damage taken reduction, and then 55% of stats, 35% of which are defense, which is tanky. And it's like, okay, he's got a meta relevant amount of stats, tons of all damage taken reduction. It almost doesn't matter that half his skills skills are useless because that's a ton of stats, right? So when we pair that with Choe Yeong, who is known for being pretty tanky but also having lots of counterattack damage, right, you'll see that the synergy here actually makes a lot of sense, because one of the things about true damage is that it doesn't scale off of skill damage bonus, it doesn't scale off of a ton of extra attack, but it does scale off of all damage, right? I mean, it is all damage. And so the all damage on Ragnar is almost one of the only ways that you can boost the damage output of your Choe Yeong with his active skill. Now this also does some mighty healing, and you have 30% archer defense on top of the 35% you already have. You get 10% more normal damage if it's full archers, which you should try to do obviously, but maybe it's a little bit mixed. There's also another 20% normal damage taken reduction on the third skill here. Okay, so that's a total of 40% normal damage taken reduction on top of 20% all damage taken reduction on the active skill of Ragnar. And we've got the negation of health and defense debuffs here. That's mainly for infantry. And then of course the expertise is where all of the counterattack damage is, and this is what really hurts people that are trying to swarm down a flag, right? And look, like, I know when we see a Choe Yeong Garrison, it's like, okay, probably don't swarm that down, but like if you're in Kingsland and time is of the essence, then you might not really have much of a choice but to swarm this down, right? And you're going to take a lot of deads, you're going to take horrible trades, but like if you have to do it, you have to do it, right? And so okay, now we've got upwards of 40% counterattack damage on top of 40% all damage on top of like 60% all damage taken reduction in the case of infantry and cavalry. I think you can see where the synergy of this pairing actually lies here and why it actually can perform pretty good. But then the question becomes like, okay, well, this sounds good on paper, right? I mean, it sounds good, it sounds like there's synergy there, but how does it actually perform in KVK? How does it actually perform when it is put to the test? And I've got 3 reports here that I want to share with you guys, and we actually rallied this specific garrison. I actually don't know how many times specifically. These were the 3 that I were in, and it was each troop type. Okay, so we have one of infantry, one of archers, and one of cavalry, and so we'll be able to see how each of those troop type rallies did against the Choe Yeong Ragnar garrison. Okay, now the first one I want to share with you is actually a Shapur Ashurbanipal rally. Of course, this is archers. Okay, so we're looking at archers versus archers here, or a little bit of mixed. Okay, we see a little bit of siege in here, which is okay, not great. We see a little bit of cavalry in here. Okay, so not exactly a pure archer garrison, but that's kind of the point, right? I mean, if you're going to use somebody like Ragnar, the idea is that with a leadership secondary, that kind of gives you a little bit more leverage to have mixed troops in here, especially in something like Kingsland where you might be running out of troops, which was definitely the case for everybody involved in my Kingsland. So how did this actually do? Okay, well, if we take a look here, the total report, the total battle data, is that the deads were pretty similar. We took a few more deads, they took significantly more sev wounds, and we got almost double the kill points. Okay, now if you take a look at just the rally versus garrison, you'll see that this actually didn't work super well for the Choe Yeong Ragnar, right? This was, I mean, obviously archers versus archers. The idea here is anti-swarm, so of course the rally itself is going to do quite well here. Similar trades on the deads here, but again, more kill points for the rally and definitely less power loss for the rally side as well. Okay, so out of the gates, we don't really see the Choe Yeong Ragnar working super well against a meta archer rally, but like I said before, archers are probably the strongest thing to counter this because this takes less normal damage, right? And you're not dealing that much normal damage with archers, you're dealing mostly skill damage. So okay, maybe it's the case that a cavalry or infantry rally would perform worse here. So next, let's take a look at Ahab's rally here. This is Attila Subutai going up against the Choe Yeong Ragnar, and well, the results aren't exactly much better. In fact, the dead trade is even worse. It's almost 1.5 to 1 in favor of the rally here. So the cavalry rally definitely performed better, but what about the entire battle, right? Yeah, okay, so more kill points on the rally side, fewer deads for the rally as well, and more sev wounds for the garrison. Now keep in mind, these reports are from the rally's perspective, right? So that's what you have to remind yourself. Okay, so you know, look, we don't have all of the swarming data. Okay, so there definitely was more on the garrison side as well, but it's still interesting nonetheless to look at some of this information. Okay, the next thing we have to look at is the infantry rally. How did the infantry do? And once again, it did well, right? I mean the rally itself clearly beat the garrison, but like I said before, the garrison is mainly for counter rallies. Now this is also another player, this is a different player than the one we were looking at before, so maybe that has something to do with it. This is Jackie's rally, this is CPO Ivar. Okay, so we are looking at 3 different rally leads versus 2 different garrison leads, so there's going to be a little bit of differentiation there. Of course, this is also King of all Britain, so if you're curious about the different stratagems that were used here, so again, something like counteroffensive makes a lot of sense for a garrison like this that is just going all in on anti-swarm. Okay, and they do have the total 30% on top of that, so keep that in mind. But okay, so the Choe Yeong Ragnar is it's not great against a rally, right? I mean, like the rally, what are we talking about? The rally is going to crack it. It is what it is. It's a gold key commander. Okay, like that's what do you expect? All right, but the point of making this video is to kind of just shed some light on this garrison, which, hey, I'm a noob. Okay, I do not follow the rally garrison meta super closely. I'm a field fighter, that is my role. Maybe this is a garrison that lots of people know about and it's been all over the place and it's super strong and I'm last of the party. Totally possible. Okay, very possible. I'm not gonna act like I'm discovering fire here. Okay, clearly this has existed, but if I've not heard of this, then perhaps you haven't heard of it as well. And so I'm just making this video to kind of shed some light here where, okay, if you really need super counterattack anti-swarm garrison, maybe you could try the Ragnar secondary to the Choe Yeong and see how it actually does. From a purely rally garrison exchange perspective, it doesn't look like it holds super well, but I would love to know from you guys in the comment section below if you've used this garrison before. How does this actually perform when you see lots of people swarming this, right? I'm curious. Let me know if this has worked for you or if this is something completely insane, crazy. Don't do this. Nobody does this. This is a horrible idea. I really want to know from you guys in the comment section below. Have you seen this garrison? Have you heard of it? Am I last of the party? Totally possible, like I said, but I just think it's cool that there are people using a gold key commander in the end game in highly competitive kvks. Like this ended up being an S+ Lost Kingdom tier kvk. All right, so super insane kvk. Had a lot of fun with this. Again, I'll probably do a recap video at some point. I'm not sure exactly when. Like I said, fighting is literally like just winding down as I'm recording this video, so it's going to take a couple of days. So the last thing I want to touch on here is like, look, we looked at the reports. It looks like the Ragnar doesn't perform super well against the rally. I've reached out to those garrison players to see if by any chance they have those reports saved. I haven't heard back from them, but if I do, it will be in the pinned comment below. So if they got like an insane amount of kills off of swarmers, I'll drop it down below. Okay, but the question becomes like, okay, why even make this video if perhaps this isn't a great strategy, right? And the answer is, well, in less competitive kingdoms, in less competitive kvks, you might find yourself in a situation where you don't exactly have your best garrison players online. You might need to rush max a commander just to fill a garrison, a very key spot on the map, and you don't have enough sculptures for 2 garrison commanders. But hey, look, we've got Gold Key Ragnar who's just sitting there collecting dust. He's been maxed for years now. All you need is Choe Yeong, right? And so you spend the 700 sculptures. Not saying that that's a great strategy, right? You shouldn't necessarily be dumping sculptures last minute into a half-baked garrison just for whatever reason, but like, look, sometimes you got to do what you got to do to win, right? And some players might have tons of sculptures who want to make that commitment, and again, they can do that for 700 sculptures instead of 1400, which is what a full pair would cost, and you can make this sort of work. Okay, and I think that's one of the things that, you know, a lot of people forget when they look at these Rise of Kingdoms videos. We always talk about the latest meta, the latest and greatest things. This is the S tier thing, this is the best thing, and you should only ever do the best thing. And it's like, yes, in a perfect world, only ever use the best garrison, only ever have max tech, only ever use iconic tier 5 everything. Like, of course, right? Of course, just pick the biggest number of everything and do that, right? But we don't live in a perfect world, and there are those players in smaller kingdoms that maybe they just don't have a garrison player online. And so maybe this is something to consider. Again, keep an eye out on the pinned comments. If I get any more information from these players after reaching out and after making this video, I'll drop it down below. But I just wanted to clear that up here, okay? Because I can already see the comments coming like, okay, well, what the heck's the point of this video? It's like, well, the point is that it's not the worst thing in the world. You could certainly do worse. Trust me, you could certainly do worse, especially in a pinch. So I figured it would be interesting to talk about this and share it with you guys. But anyway, guys, if you made it all the way to the end of the video, please consider dropping a thumbs up on it. It really does help out the channel a ton. And if you're new here, subscribe down below. And even if you think you're subbed, just double check, because you might actually not be. It's actually pretty common that I see people leaving comments saying, hey, you're right, actually I wasn't subscribed, I thought I was. Sometimes YouTube unsubscribes you, so check down below. With that being said, guys, thank you so much for watching. This has been Omniarch. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Peace.